The thunderous crack of a single gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Miles City, Montana, in the sweltering summer of 1878. Silence fell immediately after, all eyes turning toward Stella Rose, her auburn hair blazing in the afternoon sun as she lowered the Winchester rifle with steady hands. The bullet had pierced the center of a tin can perched on a fence post 50 yards away, a shot many men in town couldn't make with twice the effort. "Damn," someone whispered from the gathered crowd. Stella lowered the rifle and turned to face the dozen or so onlookers who had gathered to witness what they'd expected would be a spectacle of female ineptitude. Instead, they'd gotten a demonstration of marksmanship that left jaws hanging. "Anybody else want to question whether I can defend my own homestead?" she asked, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet street. The men shuffled their boots in the dirt, avoiding her gaze, all except one. Quincy Lawson leaned against a hitching post, a half-smile playing across his sun-weathered face. Unlike the others, he hadn't been laughing when Stella had marched down Main Street with determination in her eyes and her late father's rifle in her hands. "Watch her aim straight," he had said to the gathering crowd of chuckling men. It hadn't been a joke or a taunt, it had been a warning. "Miss Rose," Quincy said now, pushing himself upright, "I reckon that settles the question of your ability to handle yourself." Stella nodded curtly in his direction. At 23, she had spent the last month since her father's passing fending off both predators and suitors, often finding little difference between the two. Every man in Miles City seemed to think a woman alone couldn't manage the Rose homestead without male assistance. And every one of them had designs on her 160 acres of prime Montana territory more than on her heart. "I appreciate your faith, Mr. Lawson," she replied, "though it seems in short supply around here." Quincy approached, his tall frame casting a shadow in the late afternoon light. "Most men don't like being shown up by anyone, let alone a woman, makes them feel small." "I'm not trying to make anyone feel anything," Stella said, checking the rifle's chamber before sliding it into the leather scabbard hanging from her saddle. "I'm just trying to live my life and keep what's mine." "Fair enough," Quincy replied. His blue eyes caught the sunlight as he studied her. At 28, he'd seen enough of the territory to know that strength came in many forms. But the Montana territory ain't always kind to those who stand alone, no matter how good their aim. Stella mounted her dappled mare with practiced ease. "I've been standing alone since my mother died when I was 12, Mr. Lawson. My father taught me everything I need to know about survival." "I don't doubt it," Quincy said. "Just offering an observation, not charity." Something in his tone made Stella pause. Unlike the others, Quincy Lawson didn't seem to be angling for anything. As the owner of the livery stable on the edge of town, he had his own business to tend to and from what she'd heard was doing well enough not to need her land. "I should get back before dark," she said finally. "Those cattle won't feed themselves," Quincy nodded. "Safe ride, Miss Rose." As Stella rode out of town, the weight of stairs heavy on her back, she couldn't help glancing over her shoulder once. Quincy Lawson remained in the middle of the street watching her go. Their eyes met briefly before she turned forward again, urging her horse to a canter. The 10-mile ride back to her homestead gave Stella plenty of time to think. The display in town had been necessary. Rumors had been circulating that she couldn't protect her property, making her vulnerable to the land-hungry men of Miles City. Her father's death from pneumonia had left her with the ranch, 3 ranch hands who might or might not stay loyal without Jacob Rose's commanding presence, and a reputation as a stubborn woman who didn't know her place. By the time she reached the white clapboard house nestled against a backdrop of rolling hills and pine forests, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Her 3 ranch hands, Miguel, Tobias, and Elijah, were already finishing up the evening chores. "Evening, Miss Rose," Elijah called out as she dismounted. At 52, he was the oldest and had been with her father the longest. "Everything all right in town?" "It is now," Stella replied, handing him the reins. "Any trouble here?" Elijah shook his head. "Quiet as can be. Though that Warner fellow rode by earlier, asking if you'd reconsidered his offer." Stella sighed. Samuel Warner owned the largest ranch in the territory and had made no secret of wanting to add her land to his holdings. His proposal of marriage had been as romantic as a business transaction. "I hope you told him my answer remains the same," said something along those lines. Elijah replied with a hint of a smile, though maybe with a few extra words thrown in. Stella laughed for the first time that day. "Thank you, Elijah, I'll see to dinner." Later that evening, as she sat on the porch watching darkness fall over her land, Stella tried to imagine what her father would say about her current predicament. Jacob Rose had been a fair man who treated his daughter as an equal, teaching her to ride, shoot, and manage the ranch books with the expectation that she would one day run the place alongside a worthy husband, not in his shadow. "Find a partner, not a master," he'd told her more than once. But in Miles City, most men seemed interested only in mastery. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. Stella reached for the rifle she'd propped against the porch railing, but relaxed slightly when she recognized the rider's silhouette in the moonlight. Quincy Lawson dismounted and removed his hat as he approached the porch. "Evening, Miss Rose. Hope I'm not disturbing you." "It's late for social calls, Mr. Lawson," Stella replied, though she didn't raise the rifle. "This isn't exactly social," he said, his expression serious. "May I?" He gestured toward the porch steps. Stella nodded, curiosity overtaking caution. "I heard talk in town after you left," Quincy began, sitting on the bottom step. "Samuel Warner's been making noise about how a woman can't legally hold a homestead claim without a husband. Says he's got some lawyer from Helena coming to look into it." Stella's blood ran cold. "That's nonsense. My father filed all the proper paperwork. This land is mine, free and clear." "I believe you," Quincy said, "but Warner's got influence with the territorial officials and money talks." "So what are you suggesting?" Stella asked, her defenses rising. "That I sell to Warner before he steals it legally, or perhaps you've come with your own offer." Quincy shook his head. "I'm not here for your land, Miss Rose. I've got no interest in ranching. The livery keeps me busy enough." "Then why are you here?" Quincy looked up at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Because what Warner's planning isn't right, and because I thought you should know what you're up against." Stella studied him, trying to discern his true intentions. "I appreciate the warning, Mr. Lawson, but I can handle Samuel Warner." "I don't doubt your courage, Miss Rose. It's the law I'm worried about. The way it's written doesn't always favor those who deserve its protection." The truth of his words settled heavily between them. For all her determination and skill with a rifle, Stella knew she couldn't shoot her way through legal challenges. "What would you do?" she asked finally. Quincy stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I'd find allies, and I'd be prepared for a fight that can't be won with bullets." He paused. "The town meeting tomorrow, Warner's planning to bring up the matter there. Might be good for you to attend." Stella nodded. "I'll be there." "Good night then, Miss Rose." "Good night, Mr. Lawson, and thank you." As Quincy rode away, Stella remained on the porch, watching the stars emerge above her land that suddenly felt less secure beneath her feet. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Stella dressed in her most respectable riding skirt and jacket, plaited her hair into a neat braid, and rode into town earlier than necessary. She had business to attend to before the meeting. Her first stop was the office of Harold Jenkins, the only lawyer in Miles City. The small wooden building sat between the general store and the barber shop, its windows clouded with dust. "Miss Rose," Jenkins greeted her, looking up from a stack of papers. "What brings you in today?" "Information, Mr. Jenkins," Stella replied, taking a seat across from him. "About homestead laws as they pertain to unmarried women." Jenkins removed his spectacles, polishing them with a handkerchief. "Ah, I suspected you might be visiting soon. News travels fast in small towns." "Then you've heard about Warner's claims?" "I have, and I should tell you there's some ambiguity in the law." For the next hour, Jenkins explained the complexities of the Homestead Act. While unmarried women over 21 were indeed eligible to claim land, local interpretations varied, and challenges could be mounted on various technicalities. "So it comes down to who has the most influence with the territorial judge," Stella concluded. Jenkins nodded reluctantly. I'm afraid that's often the case, especially in territories not yet granted statehood. Stella thanked him for his candor and paid his consultation fee, though the information had done little to ease her mind. Her next stop was the bank, where she withdrew a significant portion of her savings money that might be needed for a prolonged legal battle. As she stepped out onto the boardwalk, she nearly collided with Quincy Lawson. "Miss Rose," he said, steadying her elbow, "you're in town early." "As are you," she replied, noting the concern in his eyes. "Is something wrong?" "Warner's brought in not just a lawyer, but Judge Williams from Helena," Quincy said quietly. "They're meeting at the hotel right now." Stella's heart sank. Judge Williams was known throughout the territory as a man easily swayed by powerful interests. If he was already meeting with Warner before the town meeting, it didn't bode well for her case. "I see," she said, squaring her shoulders. "Then I'd better make sure my voice is heard clearly at this meeting." "You won't be standing alone," Quincy assured her. "There are folks in town who don't appreciate Warner's methods, myself included." Stella studied him. "Why do you care so much about this, Mr. Lawson? You barely know me." A shadow passed over Quincy's face. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when men like Warner go unchallenged. My sister lost her husband's farm in Wyoming under similar circumstances 2 years ago." Understanding dawned. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, be prepared." He glanced toward the town hall where people were beginning to gather. "The meeting's starting soon. I'll see you inside." The town hall was crowded by noon, filled with the voices of ranchers, shopkeepers, and townsfolk. Stella took a seat near the front, aware of the stares and whispers that followed her entrance. Judge Williams sat beside Mayor Thompson at the head table, his corpulent frame spilling over the edges of his chair. Samuel Warner occupied a prime seat in the front row, a thin man in an expensive suit, presumably his lawyer, at his side. The meeting began with routine matters discussions about road repairs, a proposal for a new schoolhouse, complaints about cattle straying onto neighboring properties. Stella felt her nerves stretching taut as the minutes ticked by, waiting for Warner to make his move. Finally, Mayor Thompson said, "I believe Mr. Warner has a matter to bring before the town." Warner stood, his tall frame imposing as he turned to address the room rather than the mayor. "Thank you, Mayor. As many of you know, I've been concerned about the proper management of adjacent lands to ensure the prosperity of our community. It has come to my attention that certain properties may not be held under proper legal claim." His gaze fell directly on Stella. "Specifically, I believe there are questions regarding the Rose homestead, currently occupied by Miss Stella Rose, daughter of the late Jacob Rose. While we all sympathize with Miss Rose's recent loss, the law is clear that unmarried women face certain restrictions when it comes to land ownership, particularly when the claim was originally filed by a male relative." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Warner nodded to his lawyer, who stood and began citing legal precedents that Stella only partially understood, though their implications were clear. Her claim to her father's land was being legally challenged. When the lawyer finished, Mayor Thompson looked uncomfortable. "This seems like a matter for the territorial courts, not a town meeting." "Indeed," Warner agreed smoothly. "However, as this affects the economic interests of Miles City, I thought it proper to inform the community. Judge Williams has kindly agreed to review the case immediately, given its urgency." Judge Williams nodded gravely, though his eyes never met Stella's. "If I may speak," Stella said, rising to her feet without waiting for acknowledgement. Mayor Thompson hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Miss Rose." Stella turned to face the assembled townspeople. "My father came to this territory 15 years ago with nothing but a wagon, 2 horses, and me a child of 8. He built our ranch through hard work and determination, fulfilling every requirement of the Homestead Act. Before his death, he ensured that all legal documents were transferred to my name, as was his right." She paused, looking directly at Warner. "Mr. Warner has offered to buy my land several times. When I refused to sell, he proposed marriage as an alternative. Now that I've rejected both offers, he seeks to take by legal manipulation what he couldn't obtain honestly." Warner's face flushed red. "How dare you suggest—" "I'm not finished," Stella cut in, her voice firm. This isn't just about my land. It's about whether a woman in this territory can own property independently, whether she can make her own choices, whether she must surrender her independence to satisfy men who can't accept a woman's right to say no. The room had fallen completely silent. I've proven I can defend my land, Stella continued. Yesterday, I demonstrated my ability to handle a rifle as well as any man in this room. I run my ranch efficiently, employ 3 men who can vouch for my competence, and pay my taxes promptly. If the law is interpreted to take my property simply because I'm a woman who chooses to remain unmarried, then it isn't justice, it's theft disguised as legality. She sat down, heart pounding but chin high. Judge Williams cleared his throat. Strong words, Miss Rose, but emotion doesn't change the law. Perhaps not, came a new voice. Quincy Lawson stood up from his seat halfway back in the room, but facts might. All eyes turned to him. I've taken the liberty of sending telegrams to the Territorial Land Office in Helena, Quincy continued, producing several papers from his coat pocket. I received these responses this morning, confirming that, under the Homestead Act of 1862, unmarried women over 21 are indeed eligible claimants, and that proper transfer of a claim from parent to child is legal when all documentation is filed correctly. He walked forward, placing the telegrams on the table before Judge Williams. I also took the opportunity to request copies of the Rose claim documentation. Everything appears to be in order. Judge Williams scanned the papers, his expression souring. Warner's lawyer leaned forward, whispering urgently in Warner's ear. Furthermore, Quincy added, I've spoken with several neighboring ranchers who are prepared to testify to Miss Rose's competent management of her property. Mr. Elijah Thompson, her foreman, has 30 years of ranching experience and has submitted a written statement regarding Miss Rose's capabilities. He produced another document and placed it before the judge. The room erupted in murmurs as Warner shot to his feet. This is irregular. Lawson has no standing in this matter. Any citizen has the right to present relevant information at a town meeting, Mayor Thompson replied, looking relieved at this turn of events. Judge Williams, do these documents affect your view of the case? The judge tugged at his collar, clearly uncomfortable. They would certainly need to be considered in any formal hearing. Warner's face darkened as he realized his easy victory was slipping away. This isn't over, he muttered, loud enough for Stella to hear. I believe it is, Mr. Warner, Quincy replied calmly. Unless you want to explain to the territorial governor why you're challenging established federal law. I understand he's particularly interested in ensuring the territory's reputation for fair administration of justice, given our upcoming petition for statehood. The implied threat hung in the air. Warner's political ambitions were well known, and crossing the governor would do them no favors. After a tense moment, Warner nodded curtly to his lawyer, and they both left the meeting without another word. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. Well, I believe that concludes this matter for now, moving on to our next item of business. The meeting continued, but Stella hardly heard another word. When it finally adjourned, she made her way directly to Quincy, who was conversing with several ranchers near the door. Mr. Lawson, she said when he turned to her, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks necessary, Miss Rose, he replied. Warner needed to be stopped, and you deserved a fair hearing. Still, you went to considerable trouble on my behalf. I'd like to repay you somehow. A slight smile touched his lips. Perhaps you could show me those cattle you mentioned. I've been thinking of expanding beyond the livery, and I could use some advice from someone who knows ranching. Stella couldn't help but return his smile. I think that could be arranged. As they walked out into the bright afternoon sunlight, the townsfolk who had witnessed the confrontation nodded respectfully to Stella, several of the women offering encouraging smiles. Something had shifted in Miles City that day, not just for Stella, but perhaps for all the women watching. You ride out to the ranch tomorrow afternoon, Stella said as they reached her horse. I'll show you the herd and maybe even let you try your hand at roping a calf. I'd like that, Quincy replied, helping her mount. Their hands touched briefly, and Stella felt an unexpected warmth spread through her. Until tomorrow then, Mr. Lawson. Quincy, he corrected. I think we're past formalities now, Quincy, she agreed, and I'm Stella. As she rode out of town, Stella felt lighter than she had in weeks. The battle wasn't completely won. Men like Warner didn't give up easily, but she had allies now. And perhaps something else was beginning, something she hadn't been looking for but suddenly found herself welcoming. True to his word, Quincy arrived at the Rose homestead the following afternoon. Stella gave him a tour of the property, showing him the careful improvements her father had made over the years: the irrigation system for the hay fields, the sturdy barn with stalls for a dozen horses, the bunkhouse for the ranch hands. "Your father built something remarkable here," Quincy observed as they rode along the creek that marked the eastern boundary of her property. "He did," Stella agreed, "though not alone. My mother helped design the house and planted the orchard before she passed. And I've been working alongside him since I was old enough to sit a horse." "It shows," Quincy said. "This place has the mark of people who care about the land, not just what they can take from it." They stopped at the top of a gentle rise that offered a view of the valley where 100 head of cattle grazed. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, highlighting the vibrant greens of early summer. "It's beautiful," Quincy said softly. Stella glanced at him, surprised to find him looking at her rather than the vista. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks and turned away. "It can also be harsh," she said, gesturing toward the mountains in the distance. "Winters are brutal and summers bring drought. It takes determination to survive here." "Something you have in abundance," Quincy remarked. "Necessity breeds strength," Stella replied. "When my mother died, my father fell apart for a time. I had to step up, learn quickly. By 15, I was managing most of the daily operations while he handled the business side." Quincy nodded. "My father died when I was 16, left me and my sister to fend for ourselves in Cheyenne. I worked every job I could find until I saved enough to buy into a small livery. When my sister married, I sold my share and moved here to start fresh." "And your sister?" Stella asked, remembering what he'd said about her losing her farm. A shadow crossed Quincy's face. "After she lost the farm, she took her children to California. Last letter said she's working as a seamstress in San Francisco." "I'm sorry. She's resilient like you," Quincy smiled. "It's why I couldn't stand by and watch Warner try the same tactics here." They continued riding, circling back toward the homestead as the sun began its descent. When they reached the barn, Quincy helped Stella dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for the tour," he said. "Would it be too forward to ask if I might call on you again?" Stella felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or anger, emotions she'd become too familiar with lately. "I'd like that," she replied. Over the following weeks, Quincy became a regular visitor at the Rose homestead. He brought books from his personal collection, knowing Stella's love of reading. They discussed everything from cattle prices to politics, finding common ground in their practical approach to life and their distrust of men like Warner, who used power to control others. Word spread through Miles City about their growing attachment. Some approved, seeing it as a natural solution to Stella's vulnerable position. Others whispered that Quincy had orchestrated the entire situation to gain access to her land. "Let them talk," Quincy said one evening as they sat on her porch, watching a thunderstorm roll across the distant plains. "People will always find something to gossip about." "It doesn't bother you," Stella asked, "that they think you're only interested in my property?" Quincy turned to her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Stella, I own a successful business that keeps me more than comfortable. If I wanted land, I could buy it. What I can't buy is the company of someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing, who stands her ground when challenged, who sees the world clearly and faces it with courage." He took her hand, his touch gentle. "That first day in town, when you showed everyone what you were capable of, it wasn't just your aim that impressed me. It was your dignity, your refusal to be diminished." Stella felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I couldn't let them see it." "That's what courage is," Quincy said softly. Feeling the fear and acting anyway, he leaned closer and Stella met him halfway. Their first kiss was tentative, a question rather than a demand. When they parted, Stella found herself smiling. "I wasn't looking for this," she whispered. "Neither was I," Quincy replied, "but I'm grateful to have found it." As summer gave way to autumn, their courtship deepened. Quincy taught Stella about the livery business while she helped him improve his riding and roping skills. They attended church together on Sundays and danced at the Harvest Festival, no longer concerned with the watchful eyes of the townspeople. Warner made one more attempt to challenge Stella's claim, filing a formal complaint with the Territorial Land Office. But with Quincy's documented evidence and the support of several prominent ranchers who had come to respect Stella's management of her property, the complaint was dismissed. The first snow of winter was falling when Quincy proposed, not with grand gestures or flowery speeches, but with simple honesty as they sat before the fire in Stella's parlor. "I don't want your land," he said, holding her hands in his. "I want a partnership. Your ranch, my livery, separate businesses that support our life together. I want to build something with you, Stella, not take what you've already built." Tears filled Stella's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Is that a yes?" Quincy asked, his own voice thick with emotion. "Yes," Stella managed finally. "Yes, it's a partnership I want too." They married in the spring of 1879, a simple ceremony in the small church in Miles City. Stella wore her mother's dress, lovingly preserved for this day she'd sometimes doubted would come. Elijah gave her away, his weathered face beaming with pride. After the ceremony, as guests gathered at the Rose homestead for the celebration, Samuel Warner made an unexpected appearance. He approached the couple, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Miss Rose, Mrs. Lawson, now I suppose I've come to offer my congratulations," he said stiffly, "and my apologies for my previous assertions." Stella exchanged a glance with Quincy before responding. "Thank you, Mr. Warner. Your apology is accepted." Warner nodded, then addressed Quincy. "You're a fortunate man, Lawson. She's quite the shot." "Among her many qualities," Quincy agreed, his arm tightening around Stella's waist. Warner departed shortly after, and Stella turned to her husband with raised eyebrows. "That was unexpected. People can surprise you," Quincy replied. "Sometimes they even learn." As the guests danced and celebrated into the evening, Stella found a moment of quiet with Quincy on the porch where they'd shared so many conversations. "Do you remember that day in town?" she asked, "when they all laughed at me for taking my father's rifle?" "I do," Quincy said. "I also remember telling them to watch your aim." Stella smiled at the memory. "You were the only one who didn't laugh." "I recognized something in you that day," Quincy said, drawing her close, "a spirit that matched my own." "Who would have thought that standing my ground would lead me here?" Stella mused, leaning into his embrace. "I'm beginning to think," Quincy replied, kissing her softly, "that the surest path to finding what you need is to defend what you believe in." Inside, the fiddle struck up another tune and laughter spilled out into the night. This was their beginning, not founded on weakness or necessity, but on mutual respect, shared courage, and a love that had grown naturally from the rocky soil of adversity. Years later, as they watched their children play in the yard of the expanded homestead, Stella would reflect on how a single moment of defiance had changed the course of her life. The rifle that had once been a symbol of her independence now hung above the fireplace in their home, a reminder that strength could lead not just to survival, but to the deepest kind of partnership. And sometimes, when new settlers arrived in the growing community of Miles City, they would hear the story of Stella Rose Lawson, the woman who had faced down both bullets and legal challenges with equal determination, who had found love not by surrendering her independence, but by standing firm in her convictions. "They laughed when she took the rifle," the old-timers would say, but her husband knew better. "Watch her aim straight," he said, and by God she did.